Hey, what's up, YouTube? Fox here, and I'm gonna be doing a bit of a discussion video on the six no five the five cards that hold up. What's up, YouTube? Fox here, and welcome to what will be a discussion video on those five long time banned cards that have recently gotten errata and will be coming back to us at one come April 1st with the new ban list. So first off, what we're going to do is we're going to read for each card. We're going to read the old effect, then we're going to read the new effect, and then I'll sort of go over what I think of the card, you know, and could it still be used, not necessarily in the same way that it used to be used, but it could still be used um, for competitive reasons, not just for fun, 1v1 with a friend on at school at lunch or something like that. So first off, we have Sinister Serpent. Um, and its original effect was during your standby phase. If a Sinister Serpent exists in your graveyard, you can return the Sinister Serpent to your hand. Now, its new effect is, um, if it'll load up, there we go. Um, During your standby phase, if this card is in your graveyard, you can add it to your hand. Also, banish one Sinister Serpent from your graveyard during your opponent's next end phase. You can only use this effect of Sinister Serpent once per turn. And I'm terribly sorry, my computer glitched up there. I'm sorry if you saw a glimpse of the desktop there. Um, don't know what's going on there, but so yeah, basically, um, it was a card that you would always have in hand. You always had a card to discard for Lightning Vortex, for Divine Wrath, for anything, any spell, trap, or monster effect that required you to discard one card. It was there, it was free, you never minused, never. So it was really strong, really annoying. It was probably one of the best floaters in the game because it was always there. Now you can kind of still use it the way well, I mean, you could still use Sinister Serpent like it used to be used if you ran cards like, for example, Imperial Iron Wall. Cards that prevent other cards from being banished. So, like, Imperial Iron Wall, Necro Valley. Not like Gravekeepers have any use for this card, anyways. Um, I don't know. Kai. No, Kaiku only stops your opponent from banishing. But yeah, basically, if you can just prevent cards from being banished, then you could still abuse Sinister Serpent like you could in the old days. I know Imperial Iron Wall is a good side deck card for going up against spirit beasts or spiritual beasts or whatever they're called here in the TCG, and it's also a good side deck card for going up against Infernoids. So Sinister Serpent could still be abused. Granted, you have one of those, granted you have Imperial Iron Wall, since that's probably the most popular uh, anti banish card that's probably being used at the moment. You could still abuse Sinister Serpent, uh, like it used to be. So mermails. I know with title gone, with all the big dragon rulers gone, I don't think mermails really banish anymore. I don't think banishing is part of their strategy anymore. Now that they don't have title, well, I mean, not like banishing was, a main part of their strategy. Just saying, there's not really any banishing going on anymore. At least I don't think. So mermails could definitely put in, three Imperial Iron Walls and then abuse Sinister Serpent. So it's not totally a bad card, but it is harder to abuse now than it was before. All right, next up we have Ring of Destruction. Its original effect was destroy one face-up monster card and inflict direct damage equal to the destroyed card's attack to the life points of both you and your opponent. Its new effect is during your opponent's turn, target one face-up monster your opponent controls whose attack is less than or equal to their life points. Destroy that face-up monster, and if you do, take damage equal to its original attack, then inflict damage to your opponent equal to the damage you took. You can only activate one Ring of Destruction per turn. So, biggest change right off the bat is no more tying duels. You don't both take the damage at the same time. Instead, you take the damage first, then if you're still alive, then your opponent takes the damage. Plus, the monster, you can't destroy like Blue Eyes, for example, while your opponent only has 2,000 life points left or something like that. The monster has to have attack that is equal to or less than your opponent's remaining life points. So you could still win games with this. However, it is extremely conditional, and more than likely you won't be winning games with Ring of Destruction anymore. Um, but I mean, you could, but it's extremely conditional now. Um, and also, you can only activate it on your opponent's turn, so no activating it on your turn, main phase one, and then pushing for game. No, that's not going to happen. So, um, I mean, it's still unlike Sinister Serpent, it's still a lot more playable. Like Ring of Destruction, I think of the five banned cards that we got back with erratas, I think Ring of Destruction is going to be the one of the five that is going to see the most play again, because even though you can't tie duels, even though you can't win a duel solely from activating Ring of Destruction, well, again, you could, but more than likely you're not going to, because, monster attack and their life points, whatever. But it's still a really good card. You get rid of a monster. Um, you're going to be taking damage, but at the same time, your opponent's going to be taking some damage. Um, and I mean, you could still push for game, with this card, even though it activates. You can only activate it on your opponent's turn, because what you can do is you can have your opponent do whatever. Granted that they're not going to be able to OTK you that turn, or how to say it. If your opponent brings something out, and say by the time main phase two rolls around, you're still going to have enough attack, or you're still going to have enough life points to Um, to destroy a monster, take the damage, and inflict it to your opponent by main phase two, you let your opponent do whatever. Make them feel confident that they got this. Then main phase two rolls around, and it if you have the life points to go Ring of Destruction, go ahead, Ring of Destruction. Um, and then maybe push for game next turn. So I mean, you could still use Ring of Destruction to push for games. You know, uh, turn three. If you go first, You set this, pass to your opponent, let them do whatever. Activate at main phase two. Push for game next turn. So uh, it's I'm basically what I'm just trying to say, and I know I'm making it sound a lot more complicated than I should be making it sound. All I'm saying is that Ring of Destruction, it's still good, not as good, but it is still good. It is still a good card. It is still extremely viable, and it is going to be, in my opinion, one of those five banned cards that came back that is going to be seeing the most play. Next up, we have Exchange of the Spirit. Its original effect was you can only activate this card by paying 1,000 life points. While there are 15 or more cards in your graveyard, both players swap the cards in their graveyard with the cards in their deck. Then shuffle the cards in each new deck and put it in the deck zone. The new effect is if both players have 15 or more cards in their graveyards, pay 1,000 life points. Each player swaps the cards in their graveyard with the cards in their deck. Then shuffle then shuffles their deck. You can only activate one exchange a spirit per duel. Alright, now of the five, this was the only one that got the once per duel errata. All the other ones got once per turn erratas. And for Exchange of Spirits, I think it was a good call because Exchange of Spirits, even though because what you would do is you would go through your deck, upstarts, uh, whatever, upstarts, reloads, magical mallets. You would just turn one, you would draw and redraw and what you would go through your deck and get exchange of spirits and obviously make sure you have 15 or more cards in your graveyard before you and you'd set this, you'd end, excuse me, your opponent would draw for their turn, and then what you would do is you would then activate Exchange of Spirit, pay the 1,000, and both you and your opponent would swap your graveyards with your decks. Now you would have your 15 cards in your graveyard as the requirement to activate this. However, your opponent would have nothing in their graveyard. So they're basically dumping their entire deck into the graveyard, and they only have those six cards in their hands to do something with. Now, if they didn't have, um, something to recycle cards from the deck, um, they would just they would lose because they would try to do something. More than likely, they wouldn't be able to do something. They'd end. Your turn comes around. You draw. You immediately end. You don't even do anything. You just draw. You end, and then your opponent's turn comes up, and they lose because there's no cards to draw. So it was a really nasty FTK. And now with its new effect, you can't do that. Both players have to have 15 or more cards in their graveyard. Now, granted, you could still FTK with this deck. However, that's going to be conditioned. I mean, it, you could you could use this against light sworns. Uh, say because I know they have a Charge of the Light Brigade back to two now, or at least they will April 1st. So I mean, say that first turn, you open up with this, and you go off on some combo to fill up your graveyard and get a field going for yourself. Your opponent comes around, and I'm going to be using light sworns for this example. Say they go double charge of the light brigade, uh, Raiden, some solar recharges, and let's say they have let's say they milled terribly. However, all three JDs are still in their deck. But let's say they milled like um, I don't know, bunch of spells and stuff. Um, you could then activate Exchange of Spirit. That Lightsworn player now loses all three JDs. And they get their whatever cards they wound up milling. So I mean, you could. Well, I mean, it wouldn't be an FTK, but I mean, you could seriously hinder um, a Lightsworn player like that, and you could hinder. Um, I don't know. I guess early game you could hinder a Shadal player because the cards are swapped. They're not sent, so Shadal effects wouldn't activate. So I guess you could maybe hinder a Shadal player with this. Um, you could probably hinder a Burning Abyss deck maybe with this. I mean, they do have Tour Guide at one. Um, but I mean, apart from that, I don't know. You could hinder a Sylvan player. I mean, you had or Sylvans had their a couple of their cards reprinted in premium gold, and Lone Fire's coming to three now. So I mean, maybe we'll see more Sylvans again. So I mean, you could maybe hinder a Sylvan player, but I mean, you're not going to be winning games with Exchange of the Spirit anymore. It's not going to happen. You you can maybe tech it in to, like I said, hinder other decks, but you're not going to be winning games with it. Um, Now, another thing that you could do with Exchange of Spirit that I just randomly thought of earlier today is you could use it as what do I want to compare it to? You could use it as a transmigration prophecy, I believe the card is the one that lets you return two cards from your graveyard into your deck. Um, it's a trap. It's a normal trap card. I think it came back to three like two ban lists ago. Um, but you could use this kind of like that card. I mean, uh, at first kind of compare Jar of it's nowhere on the same level as Pot of Avarice, and I think Jar of Avarice is still it's still better than Exchange of Spirit. So I mean, I didn't want to compare it to either of those two cards, but basically, what you could do is maybe you're running Light Sworns, maybe you're running Shadals, maybe you're running um Sylvans even. Um, maybe you're running a deck that mills like crazy, that goes through your deck like crazy, where you're just thinning out tremendously each turn. Say and you could use this card to recycle every card in your deck. Like I know one of the problems that I had with Sylvans is well Sylvans, and I'm sure quite a few people have the same problem with Light Sworns and other decks of that sort, is you go through your cards pretty fast. I mean, Light Sworns, um, especially with double charge now, you can thin out your decks pretty damn fast. Especially with their draw engine, or not draw engine, draw card, solar recharge, where you discard a Light Sworn, draw two, and then you mill two. Um, but you have Sylvans where you could you can do some serious excavation if you have the right cards. So I mean, you could run out of resources pretty fast if you have the right cards. And however, if your opponent also has the right cards for their deck, that means that you're probably going to lose by deck out if you go through your resources too quickly. And I think this is a good way to, in case you do go through your resources too quickly, then you can set this and reset your deck in a way. You can add all those resources that you've lost back into your deck, and then now you have a fighting chance. So I think that's probably the most um, competitive use for Exchange of the Spirit right now, is just to as a Lightstorm player, as a Sylvan player, as a Shaddoll player, as a player with a deck that mills or sends a ton of cards from their deck to their graveyard relatively fast. This is a card to make sure that you don't deck out um, halfway through a duel, so to give you a fighting chance if you run low on resources too quickly. So yeah. Now next up we have Temple of the Kings, and Uh, its original effect is the controller of this card can activate trap cards the same turn they are set. If you control Mystical Beast of Circuit and this card, you can send both to the graveyard to special summon one monster from your hand, deck, or extra deck. And its new effect, um, if it'll load again, I'm doing this on my web browser, is you can activate one trap card the turn it was set. You can send one Mystical Beast of Circuit in your monster zone and this card you control to the graveyard. Special summon one monster from your hand, deck, or one fusion monster from your extra deck. You can only use each effect of Temple of the Kings once per turn. Now, first, totally unrelated to what we're doing. It was a pain for me to find pictures of this card. I don't know why. It was a pain in the ass to find pictures of this card. But that aside, um, so it was, as you can see, it was a pretty nasty card. I mean, you ran this in Exodia. You have now turned your um, what is it? Your reckless greeds into three pot of greeds. You turned your jar of greeds and your Yatagarasus into upstart goblins. All right, it was just like you, you open up with this card, you won. That was it. You won. If you were running an Exodia deck, because you ran three copies of this, I would imagine, and then you you run nothing but spell and trap draw cards and the five pieces of Exodia, and you win. Um, so I mean, it was a really stupid thing, and as you can see, this was in a structure deck. This was structure deck Merrick, I believe, that it came out in. So yeah, that was pretty crazy. And with its new effect, you can only activate one trap card per turn. And also uh, the special summoning from your extra deck. Now you can't like uh, now you can't poop out a Star Eater, or or some high level synchro monster. Oh God, dang it! Why is it doing that? I mean, I know my computer's pretty bad, but that's pretty annoying. Um, but it's just it does make it a bit more balanced in terms of that. I mean, there are still some pretty strong fusion monsters that you can bring out with it, but but I mean that's just the second effect. The first effect has been totally nerfed. But I mean, as far as this the second effect here goes, the second effect is is more balanced now. But its first effect, it's pretty watered down now. It's nowhere near as good as what it used to be. I mean, you could use this in order to activate oh, what is it, a jar of avarice right off the bat. So I mean, there is that, but it's nowhere near as strong as it used to be. Now, talking about cards that are nowhere near as strong as they used to be, let's move on to our final card, and that is Crush Card Virus. Its original effect was tribute one dark monster with 1,000 or less attack. Check all monsters on your opponent's side of the field, your opponent's hand, and all cards they draw until the end of your opponent's third turn after this card's activation, and destroy all monsters with 1,500 or more attack. Its new effect is tribute one dark monster with 1,000 or less attack. Your opponent takes no damage until the end of the next turn. Also, you look at your opponent's hand and all monsters they control, and if you do, destroy the monsters among them with 1,500 or more attack. Then, your opponent can destroy up to 3 monsters with 1,500 or more attack in their deck. Now, back in the day, this was this was basically Exodia. You opened up with this and you won. It was as simple as that. And as you can see, it was a Shonen Jump Championship prize card. That's what the SJC CS is. So, um, I think this was like $1,000+ card, and then it did get a couple reprints. But I mean, it was still like at least $100 card. It was just this card. I'm gonna quote Asian Eyes on this. This was one of the strongest cards ever made in the game. Um, because you opened up, as soon as you activated this, you won the duel. Your opponent could not do anything for 3 turns, and they couldn't summon out any of their strong monsters. Um, they were left with weak sauce monsters. They couldn't do anything unless maybe I don't know, they had swords of revealing light. But more than likely, you activated this, you won the duel, and now it's just it's terrible. It is such I think of it hands down of these five cards that got reprinted, Crush Card Virus will probably see absolutely no play in competitive light, in competitive means, because first off, we have no Sangan to to use for its effect, and um, your opponent takes no damage, so you can't clear the board and push for game, and uh, it only lasts for this turn. It doesn't last for 3 turns. It's just that for the first time you activate it that turn, it gets rid of all monsters in hand and on field with 1500 or more attack. And in place of the third turn lingering effect, it gives your opponent the option. So your opponent gets to choose whether or not they want to do this. You have no power over this. Your opponent gets to choose whether or not they want to send 3 monsters with 1500 or more attack from their deck to the graveyard. Now, you could go minus so, so hard with this card. I mean, if you're going up against a light sworn player, you activate this, they'll be all like, "Oh, sure, let's send a Jane, Lila, and a Raiden. Thanks. JD next turn." Um, say you're going up against, I don't know, I think I think Infernoids have relatively high attack, or at least some of them do. So you activate this against an Infernoid player. You're not like they'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll just let's see, I need this Infernoid and that one in the graveyard, and I game you next turn. You activate this against a Shaddoll player because I think there are I think like Beast and Dragon and a couple other ones I think have 1500 or more attack. You activate this against them. They're all like, oh, okay, so I want to pop a card, and then I want to draw one, and I'm going to search with this one. Okay, thanks. I'm going to game you next turn. Crush card, it's just, you go minus so hard with Crush Card Virus now. It's nowhere near as good as a card as it used to be. It is a terrible card now compared to what it used to be. And it's just, you're it's just, I agree with Asian Eyes, because the reason why I'm sort of making this video is because I saw his discussion video on these 5 cards, and I kind of wanted to do the same thing, um, just so I could get my opinion out there on these cards. Um, and I agree with him. This card really should have never got errated. It should have stayed banned, and then they should have just made a a new watered down Crush Card Virus. I mean, it would have just been way better because I know a lot of people are really, really pissed off about this errata because it's terrible. It makes the card completely unplayable. Because Yu-Gi-Oh's, it's gone on far enough to where, like, back in the day, um, you didn't really utilize the graveyard back in the day. You didn't really, you know, spam things out from the graveyard. You didn't, banish things from the graveyard. It was just, if something went to the graveyard, more than likely you're not going to be seeing that card again for the rest of this duel. But now, it's like the graveyard is the biggest aspect of the game. So many decks utilize the graveyard. So many decks spam cards, spam monsters out from the graveyard. So many decks banish monsters out of the graveyard to do stuff. I mean, it's just the graveyard is so important now compared to what it used to be. I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. I took a 7 year hiatus after GX, I think it was, um, or 7 year hiatus after 2004, I think it was. But it's just the graveyard. The game has evolved so much, and I'm not saying because of synchros and Xyz and pendulums. I'm just saying the way that the game goes, the key aspects of the game. I guess I don't know. I could be just saying a bunch of nonsense that's completely wrong, and I'm just trying to sound smart. I don't know, but basically, Crush Card Virus, it's such a bad card now. It's not going to see any play because, at least not in this meta, because you'd go minus so hard every time with this card, at least if you were to go into a tournament. So so yeah, that's pretty much it for this discussion video. Um and as far as I feel about erratas in general, I feel yes, there are cards on the ban list that should be errated so that they could come back. Crush card virus errated, but something like uh, Temple of the Kings errated, where they slap on a once per turn or once like Exchange of the Spirit. They just slap on something real simple like that, like with Stratos. Make it so that you can only activate each effect once per turn, or make it, or even uh, stronger, make it so that you can only activate one of his two effects per turn. That way they can't, even though I don't think anyone ever used the back row popping, the back row, just make it so that, they can't spam him out twice to get a search and then destroy a spell or trap card. Um, just some small once per turn effect. I think a lot of the cards on the ban list could use, and maybe if they needed something a bit more, maybe do something like with Ring of Destruction. I mean, still make it do what it still make it do what it used to do, just um I don't know, not as bad as Crush Card Virus, you know. But and so I think some cards should get errated, but just little tiny erratas, once per turn, once per duel, a type of erratas. And uh, while some cards should just you do not errata. There are some cards that just they cannot be errated either because um errata it would mean changing the entire card like Crush Card Virus and making it a useless card. Like for example, Pot of Greed. There's no way you can errata that card. I mean, its effect is 3 words: draw 2 cards. There's no way you can errata that without completely changing the card. Um, so I mean, there are cards like Pot of Greed that just they cannot be errated to come back. All right, Konami will just have to make a new card that's just basically a watered down version of that card. Now I know they did do that with Pot of Greed. They made a Shard of Greed. Um, but it's just some cards can be errated, some cards can't, and that's really what it comes down to. So I think overall, errata-ing some of these cards is good. However, sometimes, like with Crush Card Virus, I know I'm a broken record on this, but it's not good. So, let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below about giving cards erratas to bring them back off the ban list. Um, and what do you think about these five cards? What do you think is going to see the most play in a competitive light? In my opinion, I think Ring of Destruction is going to see the most play in a competitive light. And if I were to rank them as in competitiveness, um, or in likelihood of how much they would see competitive play from 1 to 5. I think no, Sinister Serpent, number two, right after Ring of Destruction. I think it'll see some play because, like I said, Imperial Iron Wall is a good card to stop Infernoids and what the new Chaos Dragons that are coming out, and Ritual Beasts. So you could still abuse Sinister Serpent. And then after that, you'd probably be Exchange of Spirit because, like I said, Sylvans, Lightsworn, Shadalls, anything that goes through the deck relatively fast and can run out of resources relatively fast. This is just a good card to be able to recycle everything while at the same time having the possibility to hinder your opponent. And then after that, Temple of the Kings and Crush Card Virus, which I think will see no play. So that's what I think of if I had to rank them 1 through 5 as to who would see 1 through 5 from most likely to see competitive to least likely to see competitive. So so yeah, again, thank you guys for watching, and let me know what you guys think of these five cards. Will you run any of them? And what do you think about cards getting errata'd in general? All right. So yeah.